And it's interesting that for some reason, God has given both my husband and me the gift of networking. And we're kind of like, a lot of people call me, Mrs. Forrest Gump, because there's just so many things that I was there for, that there was absolutely no reason for God to have me there for. So I do have a lot of, firsthand experience about the last half century of American history. I didn't know Ben Franklin, though, I have to say. But I do think that America, since the 1970s, has been kind of in a situation like the Book of Judges. And I'm going to give a little disclaimer here. I am unabashedly religious, and I'm going to be unabashedly religious. And I don't mind if you're not, okay? But that's where I'm coming from, and just to make that clear. But we are a lot like the Book of Judges right now in America. God has, remember in the Book of Judges, the people of Israel would, get themselves into a deep hole, and the Philistines or somebody would come in and start attacking them, and then they would pray and cry out to God, and he would raise up a leader like Gideon or a woman one time, Deborah, and he would raise up these leaders, and the leaders would get the people out of the trouble that they were in, and sure enough, what happened? People went right down again. And so the Book of Judges is just this hill and valley thing of the people falling into despair and turning away from God, and then crying out to God, and God giving them a leader that would take them out of that valley. The leader would get them out, down the valley they'd go again. And so really that's what's happened in America. I do remember I was a good Democrat in the 70s, and I was campaigning against Richard Nixon, as a matter of fact. And I knew that he was God's judgment on America when he was elected. I thought that was the first judgment of God on America. And in a way, it did kind of turn out like that, with the Watergate scandal and all of that. But then Jerry Falwell raised up the moral majority, and people started crying out to God for a leader. I voted for Jimmy Carter because he was born again, and I thought, that's all you need. You just need a born-again president, and everything will turn out great, and it turned out not so great. And Jimmy Carter was the last Democrat I ever voted for. But Jerry Falwell raised up in the 1970s the moral majority, which how many of you participated in that? How many of you are old as I am? A few of you, okay, good, not so many. But I remember my oldest daughter actually went to that big gathering on the mall in 1979 when all the Christians went to Washington to pray for God to raise up a leader. And sure enough, the best thing that Jimmy Carter ever gave us was Ronald Reagan, don't you? And Ronald Reagan knew Mr. Lafleur, and he, lowered our taxes and got us out of trouble and raised more money for the government. So I wish somebody would remember that lesson. That's not so long ago. But anyway, I had one of my Forrest Gump opportunities was that I happened to be running an organization at that time in the 70s, a national organization, and I was invited to the White House. My husband and I were invited to the White House and had many meetings with President Reagan in the executive office building. Now it was us and 500 or 600 other people with President Reagan, but it was great, and he would tell us how people did not realize what bad financial shape the country was in when Jimmy Carter left office, and how close we were to bankruptcy and everything. So I think if that was a time like this. So what happened was, we went down in the valley, we cried out to God, he gave us Ronald Reagan, and what happened? We all went back to sleep again after the moral majority, didn't we? All the Christians said, oh boy, that was close, and then we just went back to our lives and our churches, and that was the end of it. So then came 9/11. God woke us up again. I was in a hotel in Denver at a meeting on 9/11 and didn't get home for 2 weeks after that, but I remember that my first thought was, God is beginning to judge America. I mean, that was my first thought, and I know that when Jerry Falwell and Pat Robertson said that on TV, everybody said it was horrible, and I thought, don't take it back, it's true. I mean, I think, Ruth Graham at one point said, if God doesn't judge America, he'll have to apologize to Sodom and Gomorrah. Abe Lincoln said that the Civil War had to account for every drop of slave blood, and how many babies have we killed, and how much blood do we have to atone for in this country. I really believe that, and so what happened after 9/11 was we prayed and cried out again, and George Bush, you know, did a great job on that pile of rubble by the World Trade Center, and for, 2 months, people were back in church and praying and looking to God and crying out to God, and what happened? We went right down in the valley again. So here we are. Now we've got Barack Obama, and now we're crying out to God again. And, you know, I don't know if we're going to learn this time, but I hope we do. I hope we do. Because I'm thinking, I don't know how many chances God is going to give us. And I am praying that God will raise up a leader, and that this time we'll remember. And I think we will, because it's people like you who are now getting involved and who are learning about the Constitution, learning about the founders. And this is the key. Glenn Beck said today on his radio program that I listen to him while I work out, and he's going to start his Founding Fathers Fridays now with Lives of the Founding Fathers. And it's interesting because the Christian Law Association wrote a book in 2003, which will hopefully get here tonight. Pray that it will. The guy bringing him had a flat tire, so I'm hoping he's going to be here by the time we're finished. But we wrote this book with David Barton from Wall Builders. David Barton's got a very interesting background. In the 1970s, God called him to start a little Renaissance museum down in Texas, and he began collecting original documents from the founding era. And God told him at some point America was going to go into a dark pit, and when they were ready to come out of it, he had to be there with all those original documents to show how America was founded on God and on the Bible, and that was the only way that we could get back to where we should be again. So Glenn Beck just said this morning that David Barton is the person that he's working with on his Founding Fathers project, and it's the same guy that we work with on the One Nation Under God book, which hopefully will be here later. But see, the thing that troubles me is we can't just learn about the Constitution, and we can't just talk about do what the people say, do what the people say. You must remember Rome and the bread and circuses, and how what the people said was not always what God wanted to have done. And we are not a democracy, we are a republic. And the reason that we are a republic is because we're supposed to be doing God's work in this country, not democracy. Our founders hated democracy because they realized that the people could get really out of control. And now that we're bordering on more than 50% of the people getting more than 70% of their income from the government, what the people want is not necessarily what's going to be good for us. So our nation was founded on God. It was founded on the principles of the Bible. You didn't have to be a Christian to be part of the country. You still don't. But the principles that we were founded on, the thing that makes freedom work, is the biblical principles. And I'm hoping that when Glenn Beck gets into his Founding Fathers biographies, that he's going to bring that part of the Founding Fathers out, because a lot of the books that have come out recently on the founders have not really stressed where they're coming from spiritually, and that's what I want to tell you about tonight. As we look for God to raise up some new leaders, we need to look at the ones that he did raise up back in 1776, because they were all Christians, and you know, they were all basing what they did on the Bible. The country at that time was what I like to call marinated in the Bible. Everybody spoke using biblical cliches because everybody knew the Bible. They learned it in school. They memorized it. The McGuffey Reader had, A is for Adam, who fell. I mean, and do you realize that I actually knew people who studied in school with that book? That's how old I am. But it actually was around and being used in the schools until about 1930. So there are people living today who did study it with that McGuffey Reader. And now things, of course, have all changed. So what's happened today is that even though some of the founders were not actually Christians, and even though some of the country was not actually Christian, and probably half of the country was really Tory, and wasn't even on our side in the revolution, they were on the British side, even with all of that, our whole country was marinated in these biblical principles.